Okay, so as I said, you are going to see some works which are in between art and architecture, and they are known, as spomenics. They were built in former Yugoslavia. They are modern abstract monuments that try to pay homage to the tragedy of the Second World War, the fallen during that time. And I thought that these works somehow connect to the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, because they represent a revenge through culture on a tragic life. And I said, and you probably remember, that he also said, Friedrich Nietzsche, that the human being is the only animal who laughs, and that's because he suffered the most. So while these monuments are not laughters, they represent, through their creativity and their power, as I said, revenge on the sadness, the tragedy of what the Second World War was. And it seems that, from what I read, the former president of former Yugoslavia, Tito, commissioned many artists and architects to build these monuments all over the country. And they are remarkable. And now I'm going to show you quite a number of them. The word itself represents the location of the monument. I will not read it because I will probably mispronounce it. This is a work that, in my opinion, is one of the best, and was created by an important sculptor from former Yugoslavia. I like these works, and they are quite large. You are going to see pictures with a human being near them, and you'll be astonished how big some of them are. They are commemorative artworks, but they transcend even somehow the wording artwork, or the word artwork, because they have this public dimension. They are also very large, some of them. They are built or erected in some, very impressive landscapes, and they have this quality that they are. Some of them are actually buildings, and you are going to see them, but they don't serve a pragmatic function. They are spiritually charged. They are commemorations. They have to do with memory, with spirit, with paying homage. So with a function that is rather metaphysical, not physical. This is a building. It's a building, but it's a sculptural building, and it's almost a sculpture, but almost an inhabited sculpture, as Brancusi would have said. Why the connection with Nietzsche? Although I'm sure when they erected them, they didn't think of Nietzsche, but I think of Nietzsche because they are, as I said, gestures of revenge on a tragedy, on a painful life, trying to, through creativity, to assert, a desire to continue, a desire to live, a desire to create. And as such, in my opinion, they represent Nietzsche's thoughts. Some more, some less. This is a sculptural work. It's not a building. This is a building, and so many of them were erected all over former Yugoslavia. We are going to see in detail some of them. Some of them might surprise you, some others might surprise you less. But what is interesting, again, is that they are constructions. Some of them, they are buildings that their raison d'etre, their reason to be, is not of a pragmatic nature, but it has to do with a symbolic dimension. And some of them, in my opinion, are still very impressive. So they were built in the 1960s and 1970s. So, you know, like 15, 20 years after the end of the Second World War. You will see in detail, they are very complex sometimes and very, very interesting. I read on the web, there are people who think that they are, you know, very strange, works. They are unique in a way. I mean, unique was, of course, there are monuments all over the world, but in this case, it was a collective action, very ample, and governed from the political center and with a large variety of expression. Like, for example, this one compared to the previous one, you know, they are very different. This picture in particular, I feel somehow connected. It's almost like a fist, you know, against the sky, but it's, or against something, maybe not the sky, but it's a desire, a willful desire of a human being or several human beings to persist. As Samuel Beckett said, I can't go on, I will go on. In other words, it's about this willfulness fueled by the human soul and by the desire to transcend suffering. If I understood, yes?
They look like those sculptures on Easter Island, those human figures looking at the sky. Somehow it reminded me of them.
Yes,
Do you know about it?
I know what you are talking about. Yes, thank you, Václav. But they are very different, as you can see, and you know, it's very possible that I understood some of them were abandoned and you know, even vandalized. But all in all, they are constructions. They are somewhere in between sculpture and architecture. And I think this dimension of architecture should be somehow brought back to architecture. Of course, you cannot make a monument of any building now, but I think the symbolic and the metaphoric side of architecture is important. And these are, you know, I mean, this was done 20 years, at least 20 years before deconstruction. You know, and look at this, you know, I'm sure the deconstructivists would have been very happy to see this work, which was built in the 60s or early 70s. Now, I don't know if this was intentionally destroyed or that's how it was conceived from the very beginning, but it is moving nevertheless. And you know, the location of the works, you know, far away from, in general, not always, but far away from cities and villages, you know, on top of hills and mountains. Their aloofness also connects with Nietzsche, because Zarathustra, his you know, alter ego in a way, was also aloof. You know, he was also a solitary figure, you know, contemplating the infinite and the absolute. And from his solitude was born the thought that, you know, the human being must be reborn and take upon himself, you know, the task to give meaning to his life. In the invitation I sent out, maybe I couldn't find the proper words. This is a theme that concerns me, but I read actually someone else thought of it. I read it on the web. There is a site, a website called Rethinking the Future, and you can have access to it. And there is an entry there about Friedrich Nietzsche. The question was, how would have been Friedrich Nietzsche if he was an architect? And the person who wrote, a young woman, she said, he probably would have been a brutalist And I mean, he would have built a brutalist architecture that was also sustainable. And this is a very interesting thought. How could you make a building that is brutalist, you know, like this one, and also sustainable? Because it's oxymoronic. You know, a brutalist building is anything but sustainable. But to be both would be very interesting. And I think, you know, maybe brutalist sustainability would be, you know, in the field of architecture, would be an architecture that that is not afraid of what is raw, R-A-W, what is raw. I mean, even Zaha Hadid, she said, but she didn't really arrive there, but she said that her goal was to create an architecture that was earthly, raw, and vital. Now, maybe some vitality it is in her architecture, but it's not earthy and it's not raw. Her architecture is rather sleek, was sleek, and maybe if she lived longer, maybe she would have arrived at that rawness. This is raw. It's raw concrete, you know, it's exposed concrete, it's rough. So maybe there is a way, maybe if we give up on some of our commodities, on comfort, on all kinds of gadgets, everything sleek. It's strange. There is I wanted to show a quotation from Nietzsche, and I'm very surprised it was not in the grouping that I created. It's a very important one. He said that whenever the surface it's pretty, there is something ugly underneath. And this is, in essence, you know, I quoted from memory, but that's what he said. When the surface is nice, is sleek, is you know, pretty, underneath always there is something ugly. And that's why perhaps I myself instinctually I am against finishes, because finishes hide things away. You finish up something, it's like, you know, you hide something behind the makeup. Here there is no makeup. You might like it, you might not like it, but it's not makeup. There is no makeup, and so you know what you are dealing with. And you know, I like the fact that Zaha Hadid was searching for something raw, but strangely, perhaps she didn't arrive there, and most of her works are actually sleek, not raw. These are raw. These are, you know, even if the sculptors use concrete, or the architects, it's raw, and it's not smooth. It's not hiding. You know, it's saying in a way there was a tragedy. Now this one almost disappeared, I guess, behind that vegetation. Anyway, we'll look in detail at some of these. All in all these works, in my opinion, represent this collective desire to pay homage to the tragedy of those who disappeared during the Second World War, and these monuments were also bulwarks of resistance against, you know, the memory of Nazis and the fascists and so on. A protest. They are protesting. These buildings are protesting. And in a certain way, the philosophy of Nietzsche was protesting too, protesting against all the miseries of life, protesting against hypocrisy, protesting because life cannot find meaning in lies, in you know, in excessive softness or sweetness or slickness, and finishes. That you need truth, And that truth, unfortunately, is not so easy to come across in this life. Now we are going to see some of these building sculptures in detail, and some of them I think are very interesting. This sculptor, I only have this name, and in a way I'm unhappy because I should have had other names, but I only found his name. Apparently an important sculptor he died, I think last year he died at 94 or so. This was the man, and he held important positions also in the Academy of Art in Belgrade, and he was a professor, a sculptor. But these particular works, these monuments, I think are very impressive. Look at this. This to me is very much in the spirit of Nietzsche and very much in the spirit of Zarathustra. You can tell that there was suffering here, but it is still a triumph of life and of the joy of creativity over the tragedy that preceded it. I think it's an excellent work, and too bad that later in life, apparently he didn't do this any longer, but I like this work very much. This, again, to me, is very much in Nietzsche's spirit. Because it is like how to say, it's from the human volcano exploded this creation, obviously nourishing itself from suffering, but it is a suffering that transcended itself. It didn't remain at the level of lamentation, but it's a powerful, vital expression of the human creativity. They are contorted because their contortions were expressions of the suffering that preceded them and the suffering that they were born from. Sorry about this, Alami, covers the picture. Ruins actually a picture with a ridiculous claim to author, so-called authorship. They practically ruin the photographs, their own works. But here you can see the scale and look at the human being. These are huge. You see also an aspiration, a longing for, also a revolt. These are, in my opinion, very much connected with Friedrich Nietzsche. This was not made by God. This was made by a human being who suffered. And from that suffering, this almost a sculptural scream emerged. Well, this is a visitor. this is a moving picture because the sculpture represents even anxiety, you know, tension. But this person finds peace, it seems, you know, resting on the diagonal plane of this, I would say, a very powerful sculptural work. It expresses emotions in an abstract way. And in this sense, I think is an excellent artwork. This picture also moves me because you see the old church and, you know, you see this, you know, expression of the feelings of you know, angst generated by a suffering which was assumed. So, and you have these two expressions, one, you know, the conventional church building, and then the abstract sculpture, which you know, is almost imploring the sky for something. So I like this duality. You know, on one hand, you have the church with its approximate calmness, and then you have the, you know, the tumultuousness of the statuary. This is a very different work, but also powerful, I would say. You know, with these fallen gates or just the frames, a lot is being said, I think. It's an excellent work, in my opinion. I think if we can recuperate, if we can bring back to architecture, of course, again, not every building is a monument, but if we can bring back to architecture the symbolic, the metaphoric, the emotional, the sculptural, the artistic side, architecture would become more satisfying and interesting. Even here, you know, we see something, you know, cryptical, mysterious in a way. We don't know what it is. An abstract construction, you know, on top of a hill. Or here, this is a statuary work. It's not a building, but it's powerful. And there are many, really, it's unbelievable. I don't think another country has. Other countries suffer too, of course, in the Second World War, many, most of them actually. But I think only in Yugoslavia this happened at this scale. And what is interesting, they have here and there some, you know, figurative representations of, let's say, soldiers, but most of the time, they are abstract works, totally abstract, like this. I mean, you know, I am Romanian. I am in Romania. I'm very proud of what Brâncuș built in Târgu Jiu, you know, the three works. But I don't think these works are inferior to what he did. They certainly are very emotional, very powerful, and you know, we don't even know the names of the creators. I only found that name. And look at this work in concrete. I personally think it is amazing. The true meaning has to be deciphered. You know, we can only speculate and spontaneously, I better not say much. But I let the images speak by themselves because I think they are very powerful. So, you know, they were communists just like us at that time, you know, 60s, 70s. But look at what kind of work they did, you know. We built Casa Poporului, and look what these people were building. You know, it is an art form that is very appreciated now, both in the East and the West. It's almost as if some aliens build them, you know. The otherness of these constructions is for all to see. And most of them have this dialogue with the earth and the sky, especially with the sky. You know, it's their location is also important. On top of hills or mountains. In this sense, again, they connect a lot with Zarathustra, the great porte-parole of Nietzsche's thoughts. Now, this is a reflection in water, but you are going to see the monument that made this reflection possible. Here it is. And look at the human silhouette. It's big, it's huge. I think these are remarkable works. Again, these were erected before parametry, before scripting, before programming, before deconstruction. They preceded all things that we know of now in the 21st century and at the end of the 20th century. But they were not just formal exercises. And this is what distinguishes them from some works which are, you know, mimicking, similar aesthetics. They were born from suffering. They had a commemorative function, a symbolic function. So they were not just, so-called fooling around with forms. There was a seriousness, even a gravity behind these, constructions and sculptures. Another one, so very different from the previous one. Mysterious. What are they? Why are they this way? I mean, truly, you know, the variety is incredible if you compare this work with this one. Done for the same function and built around the same time. Here is another one, also very different from the previous two. Even here we see the same, I wouldn't use the word triumph because it sounds too, exuberant in a way and too No, but it is the revenge on the diagonal of suffering, the sloping plane of suffering, of this vertical element, which is an expression of this victory over suffering, over the tragedy, and I think it is powerful, expressed very simply with two elements. You see, when the spirit of the work is valid, it doesn't matter that the surface is, corroded by time or whatever. In fact, this corrosion helps the work, because in contrast, the spirit is even more, pure and astute and strong. Another one, very different. There are many, and I didn't go through all of them, really. The intrigue one exactly through the fact that you don't know what their function is, you don't know what they are, but they don't leave you indifferent at all. They are very provocative without knowing what they are. They incite you, they entice you, they provoke you. Look at this one. What is amazing also is the level of abstraction, because usually the commissions coming from the government don't encourage too much abstraction or sophistication. But in this case, these are works that even by today's standards, they are sophisticated and powerful in an abstract way. It's very possible that the thought of Friedrich Nietzsche, that only the human is justified in laughing because only the human suffers and suffers them, so much. Maybe these works are so powerful because behind them there was a lot of suffering, but it is transcended suffering. But look at this, this is futuristic architecture done in the 60s and 70s. If you build something like this today, you would be considered wow, but this was done 50 years ago, and more than 50 years ago, probably around that, was 50 years ago, half a century ago. And the level of so-called modernity is very high. They are astonishing works. This is another one. It's very possible that these graphic interventions were not intended by the artist, but it doesn't matter. You see, when the spirit of the work is strong, when the emotion is genuine, authentic, these things are almost irrelevant. Sometimes they even add something to the work, but the work in its spirit is unchanged. This is a building. I'm not sure if this is not in Montenegro. Look at this one. Very interesting also. What exactly its function is, I don't know. But it's almost striking in its simplicity. It's not, I'm curious in what way these artists were motivated beyond the specifics of commemorating a certain event, because it's amazing this the large variety of expressions, and yet the theme was kind of the same one. Now this work, I understood, was it might be demolished. It is in so-called bad shape, but I like it even in a so-called bad shape. If it was up to me, I wouldn't demolish it. I would take care of it. It's still moving. The home of the revolution in Montenegro. Montenegro was part of former Yugoslavia at the time when this was built. I don't know what the revolution is referring to. Maybe the communist revolution, I don't know. But look at the architectural language. It's very powerful and vital. No, I think I was wrong. I think the home of the revolution is this one, not the previous one. I think these are two different works, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I don't know how it is called, the previous one. This one is the home of revolution in Montenegro. But again, the modernity is almost alarming, considering that it was built, the end of the 60s and early 70s. This is also in Montenegro, also a building. I don't know its function, but it's, I think, an impressive structure. We don't know anything about these architects, but if you build something like this today, would be published everywhere as a very striking new work. And again, I stress this fact. Yugoslavia at that time was not a very rich country. This is what I'm trying to say, and I keep saying it. You don't need a lot of money. Of course, you need money to build something like this, but you don't need to be the most affluent country on earth in order to build significantly. For me, this is Nietzschean architecture. Yes. You know, it accepts even graffitis, other signs of protest. The surface is rough, it's raw, there are no finishes, there is no so-called nice, soothing surface behind which an ugly truth is hidden. No. But, you know, even those who, I imagine this was added later, I don't know, but all in all, the power of the work accepts even interventions a posteriori that are, you know, even incongruent with the structure beneath or, you know, the original structure. It's fine. It can accommodate, you know, like a tattoo on the body of a person, you know, many things could happen, but the integrity of the body, the integrity of the being could remain intact, even when the building seems to be abandoned, like here. It's still a very powerful building. And it doesn't need to be 1 mile tall, you know, it's about the inner feeling that generated the work. It is dirty, right? Well, I don't mind. I don't mind. I think the building is very expressive, maybe even more so than if it was clean. It's fine. In my opinion, it's fine. Now, another work, this is a sculptural work, but still very, very impressive and emotional, with fluidities, you know, it's still a work which, if it was erected today, would be equally meaningful. Another one, smaller dimensions, but still very, very expressive. You wonder what inspired these artists at that time to do such works. Of course, we know now of Frank Gehry, who works with these kind of curvatures and, you know, with a lot of technology, and we are in the 21st century. But this was built half a century ago. I said built. In a way, built, yes, although it's a sculptural work, but its dimensions are close to a small building. Uh, as for this one, it's clearly a building. I don't know what its function was besides the commemorative one, but it is engaging and interesting. This one, I don't know if I have other pictures with it. This one we saw at the very beginning, and now you'll see more pictures of it with it. How moving these flowers here, these red flowers. Now, someone placed them here. A beautiful gesture of affection, very, very gentle. one would say they are not clean. To me, it's not a problem. In fact, I like them even more like this. You know, it shows the passage of time, the battering coming from the elements. And it's also about suffering. You know, the concrete itself expresses the drama that it was born from. It's darkened, but its spirit, in my opinion, is intact. It subsists, it survives, it exists. And look at the beautiful flowers. Of course, those were not made by the artists, by human beings, but by God, by nature. But they are beautiful. And it moves me, this dialogue between the fragile flowers and the structure built by the humans. Look at them, you know, in a dialogue, you know. It's nature is so very generous with us. It gives us incredible beauty. And what do we want to do? To go to Mars. That's the building that we saw before. Let's hope they will restore it. But it's a remarkable structure, really. It reminds me a little bit, well, that one is not so dramatic with a building built by Miraius and Taliabuye for a gas company of all things. But anyway, this is an interesting building, and it should be restored, repaired, and taken care of. It was this one, yes, abandoned, but still has power, the power of emotion. Look at this. One after the other, all remarkable works. Well, this picture also says suffering transcended. That person there who you know, does some choreographic work there, you know, it's like yes, like saying goodbye to suffering. And you know, and the structure, the architectonic or sculptural structure is helping, you know, is helping, and we can do through culture. That's why I thought maybe it's an extravagant thought, but I really thought that we could fight against COVID, against the virus, not only through the vaccine, but also through culture. Yes, we could say, yes, there is suffering. Yes, there is danger. Yes, we could die. Yes, we could get sick. But we could find revenge, fruitful, creative revenge through culture, through art, through writing, through music, through name it, through film. We can do it. And that's why I keep underlining and I keep saying all the time, let's learn as much as we can. Let's desire creativity and let's learn, because there is a lot to learn. And I mean, I'm afraid my words are not always inspired, or maybe often they are not inspired or inspiring, but I really desire, I have this immense desire to transcend the suffering and the isolation and the social distancing and all the things, that we are confronted with. Even climate change. Well, the climate change also happened because of in a way, being indifferent, culturally as well. I think if we can have this immense desire to learn, to absorb, to become like sponges, we can do beautiful things. And it's really our duty. The humans provoked a lot of misery on Earth. The Second World War was provoked entirely by the human beings. Other miseries are provoked by the human beings, but we can also do good. And, it's really up to us what we choose in life. We can lay on the bench, or we can lay on the sofa and watch TV, or we can learn about the works of great architects and great poets and great philosophers and become ourselves vehicles for, powerful emotions, for spirituality, for high concerns, for creativity. It depends what we do, what we choose to do. It's really our choice. We can also be indifferent, of course, but indifference, I truly believe, indifference is probably the worst attitude vis-a-vis life. Indifference can be terrible. I agree with the one who said that the enemy of love is not hate, but indifference. Who would want an indifferent so-called lover? That's not love. Indeed, the opposite of hate has more love in it than indifference. Hate, yes, is negative, but still expresses some emotion. But indifference is death. At the first sight, you might say, wait a minute, this is just, some pieces of concrete thrown together. But, this is not done by nature. It is human willfulness. It was done with an artistic intent, and I believe it is a powerful work, this work. This as well, different, but very interesting, both. This is done by the same sculptor that, we saw the portrait of, and also his name. We are approaching the end of the presentation. So all these works, in my opinion, have something Nietzschean in them. As I said, they represent, a reaction to a reality which was tragic, and a reaction, a creative reaction that is also a revenge. Through these works, these artists, these people who erected these buildings or sculptures, they show they were not indifferent. They cared. And this is very important, to care and not to be indifferent. I repeat, indifference is the worst attitude vis-a-vis life, the very worst. Look at this one, very different. This one is more, literal in a way, it's narrative. I don't know exactly what those things mean, but it's still a powerful work and an interesting and intriguing work. Some kind of a shrine. It's abstract, but perhaps there is some narrative there as well. And also, it's not just the work itself. I mean, the work itself. The work is larger because there is a landscape and there are parts outside of this so-called object that are connected with it. This is another one. And this is incredible because we are dealing probably with a population which was not educated in the field of abstract art. In the 60s and 70s, small villages on top of a hill, on top of a mountain. And yet these are, educated works. These are works done by artists who knew about modern art, about abstract art. But this is less amazing. What is amazing is that the government and the population, the people of these regions embraced these works, encouraged them, paid for them, maybe even helped. This is truly remarkable. These elements here, they are almost abstracted images of maybe some two hands or so, imploring the sky or praying. And, it's a symbolic language, it's a metaphorical language, which is, open to anyone, but still the language is abstract. Now, Homo economicus could have said, why do we need these things here? It's just a loss of money. Well, there is a meaning here that the artist wanted to convey, and they didn't think of money. They look at this. It's a complex work. It's a pilgrimage that brings you here in the vicinity of, what is here. So there is a meaning. But this is beautiful that the work is abstract, it's cryptical, and it was built, not in a village filled with art connoisseurs and art lovers, but, normal people, so to speak. Very interesting works. And again, you don't need to be Switzerland to be able to build something like this. This was built in former Yugoslavia, which was a communist country in the 60s and 70s, still struggling economically and otherwise. And still they found the resources, material and mental and emotional, to build these things. And bravo to them. I like this. I like the picture. You already saw this work, and it's the same work. I think you see, at first you don't notice that there are actually figurative representations of heads, but abstracted cubistically. So It's a good work. They were called Spomenics, les monuments de la discorde, meaning the monuments of discord, of disjunction, conflict, discord. Spomenics, that's how they are called, Spomenics. I don't know what this means in the Serbian language. This was another work, but I couldn't find other pictures with it. And this is the last work I show. It's like a temple, like a chapel in a way. Like I don't know its function, besides the emotional impact that the structure, architecturally speaking, has on me or on you. You see here, there are some figurative representations, bodies of, I don't know, soldiers, but the building, so to speak, is very abstract and mysteriously so. I like it. That's it. So